Hello and welcome to exercise 9 of chapter 4, server-side state management. Objective. The objective is to create a secure login component that demonstrates server-side state management by validating user credentials on the server. Sensitive operations like hashing and validation are handled on the back end, while the client dynamically interacts with the server and updates its interface based on responses. This exercise highlights the separation of concerns, keeping sensitive logic server-side for security and maintaining responsive client-side interactions. What you will learn: using Svelte kits plus server.js for secure server-side logic, sending and processing JSON data between client and server, implementing hashing techniques for protecting sensitive data, managing reactive state updates based on server-side responses, applying secure practices to handle user inputs in a client-server environment. Okay, we are going to set up a login page to validate a user's login. For security, the login credentials are stored server-side. Okay, let's see this in action. For now, you can follow along with the video, and later we will cover what updates files you need to get this working on your end. I open chapter for exercises, click the blue arrow next to 4_9 login. You see a login page with username and password and login and cancel buttons. Clicking the cancel button returns me to the exercises. If I click the login button, I see below the button invalid credentials in red and the frame border in red for a few seconds. Now I enter username user1 and password ABC1234. I see a welcome message page showing that I am now logged in. I can cancel to return to exercises, but in a real app you would display a dashboard or menu to access your app. This is a simplified login for the purpose of showing server-side state management. So that's the code in action. Now let's take a look at what is going on behind the scenes. Okay, now the second slide introduces a couple of things we haven't covered yet in this course. 1. Routing. 2. Server communication. First, let's talk about routing. A route is a URL path, e.g., login, that maps to specific files in src routes in SvelteKit. Routes define what content or logic is served for a given URL. In SvelteKit 5, routing is file-based and determined by the folder structure in src routes. To add a route, you'll need to add a subfolder with the route name to src routes, and that subfolder needs to have a +page.svelte file to create that route. For this exercise, we create a login subfolder in src routes, and in this we create the login route file +page.svelte. So that's routing. Next, server communication. The purpose of this route is to enable server communication. To do this, we need to create a server.js file in the root folder. The server.js processes server-side logic by handling HTTP requests, which are how the client, browser, communicates with the server over the web. Requests like post and get send data, e.g., login credentials, to the server, enabling interactions such as validation in server.js. The server securely processes user credentials, hashes and compares passwords with stored data, and responds with validation results, keeping sensitive logic server-side. Okay, so those are two new topics, routing and server communications. Before we look at the code, let's look at the structure changes necessary. In using Xcode, so I open the folder structure here. You can see I now have a src routes login folder. And this folder has files +page.svelte, the routing file, +server.js, the server communications file, and dashboard.svelte, which is displayed if the login is successful. Don't worry about the other routes are files, we will get to those soon. And a second structural change: if we scroll up to the lib folder, you will see that we have a server folder with a data subfolder within which is our user.json file. This is our server-side storage of the user credentials. Okay, I have one final slide for you with a few more details. Why do we need a login route? Good question. That login route is needed to 1. Handle server-side validation. The server.js processes and validates login data securely. 2. Enable client-server communication. The client sends data via fetch to the login route, and the server responds. 3. Separate login logic. Keeping login-specific functionality isolated ensures a clear structure. Now, as shown, we need to store the user data file containing user credentials securely, i.e. server-side. Normally user data would be in a database, but here using libserver.data which simulates server-side handling by 1. Data isolation. The file is not accessible directly from the browser, simulating back-end-only access. 2. Controlled processing. All sensitive operations, e.g., validation, hashing, are handled in server-side code, even on your local environment. 3. Realistic separation. This mirrors how server-side logic would handle secure data on a deployed server. Okay, that gives you a good overview of what's going on. Next, we dive into the code. But since this video is already over 6 minutes, I am going to dive into the code in the next video. See you there.